Writing Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices. Our hostess for today's program is Teresa Miller, Executive Director for the Oklahoma Center for Poets and Writers at OSU Tulsa.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. My very special guest today is Mr. Jack Eisner, who has written a wonderful book, a very poignant and touching book about his life called The Survivor of the Holocaust. Thank you for being here, Mr. Eisner.
It's my pleasure to be here in Oklahoma and Tulsa especially.
Well, we're honored to have you here, sir. Got to ask you, you were 13 years old when the Nazis moved into Warsaw. What had your life been like up to that point?
Well, I come from a middle-class family. We lived in a big city. Warsaw was the capital of Poland, independent Poland, 1939. And I was brought up in music. I sang in the most prestigious choir. And I won a scholarship to the conservatory. And to start, September. And exactly the German Third Reich, Nazi Germany, attacked Poland September the 1st. So I managed to go to school, to the conservatory, only less than a week.
Mm. Had you, your family, had any inkling that this kind of evil could literally land at your doorstep?
We had no inkling of that type of evil. We had an inkling that the country is going to be overrun by a foreign power, and there'll be occupation, and there'll be hardships. Perhaps some young males may be taken away for forced labor, but generally families, except some war type of lack of certain foods or rationing, nothing worse than that would we expect. Nobody expected anything like ghettos closed up hermetically with deportations, with death camps and concentration camps. This we didn't expect, no.
And you were in the Warsaw Ghetto?
I was in the, yes, I was born in Warsaw. My parents, grandparents, we come from Warsaw for hundreds of years. And at the age of 13, suddenly I found myself that I had to take over the family. I had a sister a year younger, and my mother, and my father, who was an intellectual type of businessman. He was only in business because his wife, my mother, was an aggressive type of person and pushed him into going to business. But otherwise, he was more an intellectual. And he was involved in the world of German literature, of German philosophy. And the shock that the Germans now came, and he was afraid to go out on the street even. So I had to take over the family.
And you actually led a group of heroic teenage smugglers who would go into areas.
That was later, when a few months after the Germans came in, they separated the Jews from the rest of the population and enclosed us in a walled-off, hermetically closed ghetto. The walls were guarded by special guards with dogs, and even at the entrance, there were several entrances. You had to have a special permit to go in or to go out, which was very difficult to get. And they allowed an average of about 450 calories per person of food into the ghetto. So naturally, diseases and hunger. And the young kids of 13 and 12 and 14 and 15, they became the organizers of the smuggling of food into the ghetto to feed the family, to feed, you know, my grandmother was hungry too, not only me and others, my grandfather and so many little cousins. You know, my grandma Masha had 20 grandchildren. My grandma Hannah had 11. You can imagine the slaughter that from 30 grandchildren, only I alone survived.
How did you smuggle the food and medicine back in to the ghetto?
Well, we tried different methods. At first we tried to make holes through the wall or under the wall, or we tried to push up rope and get over a 12-foot wall and so. But that was very improvised, very naive. You couldn't get in much food back and forth. But on one aspect, we found a loophole that one part of the ghetto wall was adjoining a cemetery. So we were pretending that we are with a funeral, and we were going in into the cemetery. And right there, we separated ourselves and got out on the other side of the cemetery to the city where you could allow. Of course, we had to take over our armband and pretend that we are Gentiles, that we are not Jewish. And that was risky. If they caught you got a execution immediately. And on the way back, we were coming back to the same cemetery and stayed overnight there. And we were kids, we were afraid to sleep in the cemetery.
With all that was going on,
there were certain towns that you could hide under a little bit. And we pretended, of course, we weren't sleeping. We were holding on one to another. And in the morning, we joined the next funeral who was going back in. And so on. Of course, this also required certain part of the smuggling of the food to share with the police, with the gendarmes, because they counted how many people went into the cemetery. It was not an easy task, but it worked many times. But then after the deportations, we continued smuggling, but in that case already bringing in arms, ammunition, or gear to build underground bunkers and so on. But this was done a lot by 13, 14, 15-year-old boys and girls. Even my sister helped out in the beginning, yes.
And you were also part of the ghetto uprising.
Yeah, the play, The Survivor, that was on Broadway in the Moscow Theater in 1983, 84. The big part of it is the smuggling of the kids, how they organized that.
And what was it like for you to see that play on Broadway based on your book?
Yes, the play is right now even on in Chicago and in the States and Minneapolis and some other place. But the play is basically about the children. The grown-ups are not there. It's about the 14, 15-year-olds, how they manage, how they try to survive. But all the ghetto with all these shortcomings of food and diseases and all of that, and was still manageable in comparison to later when they started the deportations. Exactly. That was simply grabbing tens of thousands of people, young and old, sick, and pushing them into cattle cars onto death chambers, to actually death factories. You know, we never would imagine that Western Christian civilization in the 20th century would invent a mass system like Ford producing cars, a mass system of killing people. You know, you said you got in 10,000 people a day from one side, and the other side came out 10,000 corpses. That is unheard of. Young, old, children.
And you were in concentration camps, and
yes, I was. I stayed in the ghetto as long as was possible, and I managed to avoid the early deportations. And then I became part of the underground resistance group that later in April 43, we had the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto. So perhaps 2,000 to 3,000 of us, youngsters mostly, here we tried to resist it, 20,000 armed Germans with tanks and Molotov cocktails. The only thing we had to fight them back was not machine guns and no artillery or no planes, but Molotov cocktails, you know, handmade bottles of gasoline with some rag, and you light it on. And we had some guns and some hand grenades, a few, but no. But anyway, for 3.5 weeks, almost 4 weeks, we resisted them, and But I was caught. I was one of those. We were caught in our bunker. I still had my mother and father hidden in the bunker. My sister was already deported or dead. And I ended up in a camp. And then I tried to escape the camp. This book, The Survivor, tells the whole story. I escaped several times, and I was caught, and from all these escapes back and forth, that continued for another 4 years. So altogether, in 1945, I was 19 already by that time. And I was liberated. I was nothing more than a bundle of bones with a skin. My weight at the time when I was liberated was about 45 pounds.
You have said that liberation became an awesome challenge for you.
Well, my last book that I just finished writing, and it will be published perhaps at the end of this year, is about how do young 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and most those that survived were that young. If you were 35 or 45 in a camp, you were already an old man, and you didn't have a chance to survive. So how do these young people suddenly liberated, and they're very happy that they're liberated? First they have to come to recoup, to get some health back. But then what do they do with their life? They're broke, they don't have any shoes, any clothing, and a family, and a sister, brother, no home, no money. They have nothing. Where do you go? What do you do? That's the story of this last book. How do you start a new life someplace, starting from a pair of shoes to feeding yourself, to trying to find some family or a new home? I was lucky.
You were reunited with your mother, is that correct?
That was 3 years later, by accident. You know, by that time I was already in a uniform of an American soldier, and the three of us were traveling in various countries in Europe still for various reasons, and also by that time I already almost gave up to look for any family. And suddenly we are waiting on a railroad station in Prague, in Czechoslovakia. And in those years, the first years after the end of the war, the whole transportation system all over Europe was in a mess. There were very few trains and no buses. So on every train that came in to take on 1,000 people, there were 3,000 people waiting to get on the roof everywhere. But we were young guys. We were in U.S. uniforms, so we thought we'll find a way. And we're sitting and playing cards in the center of the hall, and there 2,000 to 3,000 people all around us, and the train, and suddenly in the crowd, as we were playing, from the back I heard someone calling my name. I grabbed these two other guys by their arms, and they didn't know. They say, "What's going on? Play, what are you doing?" And I listened again, and I listened again, and I didn't turn around and scream, "Mama." Only my mother could have called that name, my name, in that way. And then I turned around and I saw from far away people holding her up. She was afraid she'd lose me in the crowd. And she was screaming my name and so on. And this is the way I was reunited with my mother. She got sick. I had to take her to the hospital. She was liberated by the Red Army, by Russian forces in Poland. I was liberated by American troops all the way west in West Germany. So she was liberated even 8 months before I saw freedom. And so I brought her to me, and she died in 1977, at the age of 77, as a proud mother and a proud grandmother of 3 grandchildren. So at least that part turned out miraculously satisfying.
And there were miracles in your own life. You actually survived 2 hanging attempts. How could that happen?
This book tells the story. You know, when book came out originally, the first version 22 years ago, 1981, and it was published by Morrow, William Morrow, and they made a promotional book out of it, and I was traveling around the United States and Canada promoting it. And in various interviews, critics, even the New York Times was a bestseller. They said it's impossible that this guy is telling the truth, that he was twice on a gala, and both times the gala collapsed and I fell down. And the Good Morning America, the TV, called up and contacted me and said, if you can find a witness that will verify that, we put you on Good Morning America. And I did find 3 witnesses, not one, that saw that. And even that the German officer in charge of that whole ordeal, punishing me while I tried to escape from one particular camp, and he called me. And he was beating me. I got 25 on my back, and then again another 25 on my back. And anyway, I didn't collapse yet. So at the last moment, he said, march him to the gallows. He must die. I was still marching after all that beating was going on already for an hour and a half, and 5,000 people were assembled on the counting square, or the Appellplatz, as we called. And he put me on the gallows. And as I got there, and they took away the chair, the whole thing fell down. He ordered that commander, the SS officer, his name was Fikes, and there's a whole story that afterwards, to fix it again. They fixed it, tried to put it together and so on. It collapsed again once I got on it. He gave up. He said, the hell with you. You want to live? There's somebody is praying for you. Get the hell out of here. And he started pushing me. I should run. I couldn't run much. And then from behind me, I heard that with his machine gun, he's spraying bullets. I thought on me. No, he was spraying around me, the bullets, to scare me further. And I ran and managed to get into a washing basin, a barrack where you could wash, because I was bloody all over. And from that on, I really fainted, and people helped me and put me in a bunk so I can come to myself. After that, I don't remember what happened to me.
One of the things that you have noted in your books and in your writings is that having survived as you did, that you feel a very special responsibility to keep the memories of others alive, that there are some people we wouldn't even know if
my grandma prayed for me. I was her favorite grandson, and I remember when I was 9 and 10 years old and 8 years old, she was a very religious woman. And on the Sabbath, I often was in her house, and after lunch, the Sabbath lunch, she used to sit with the Bible and pray and explain me and talk to me. And to me at the time, it seemed like the Messiah is around the corner, because she so much believed in the goodness and that the Messiah will come and people will be peaceful and nice and happy. And I thought that this is happening. It's going to happen so much. And I promised her, and then in the ghetto, she was in the ghetto with me, the whole story, how I tried to save her and I couldn't save her, but she said, don't save me. You survive. You are the last out of my 20 grandchildren. You promise you must survive, never give up. And I never did.
And you have shared the stories of so many with us, and you're very actively involved in commemorative efforts. I wish you would tell us a little bit about your special relationship with the Pope and the commemorative ceremony at the Vatican.
Well, we were both teenagers during World War II, during the Holocaust. And although he's about 4 years older than I am. And in the 1960, I was on a trip to Poland from the United States, and he was a priest at the time, and I came to one particular factory that I did some business with the United States. I used to export chemicals to Eastern Europe, to Poland, and I was buying other things. And when I visited that factory, that particular day, they had a soccer match. This factory had a lot of people worked, and they had their own team. And that day they were playing against a team of priests from the area, from Krakow. And who was the goalie on the other team? Karol Wojtyla, who later became the Pope, John Paul II. And their team lost 1-0, and I was the one who hit the goal for the factory team. And at the end of the team, we're having lunch. He sat down next to me and told me, you owe me something now. You hit the only goal that I let in, you hit now. You have to give a donation to for the church, because in those years the church in Poland was a communist Poland, and they weren't getting any assistance at all. So I said to him, I'll be happy to make a donation, but I don't have any Polish money. So what money you have? So I said, I have dollars, but it's against the law to give Polish citizens dollars. In those years, it was against. So he pulled me aside and said, the only law I obey is the Lord's law. And I gave him a donation in dollars. Now, 40 years later, 1993, I contacted them and I suggested, I had contacts with them before too, and I suggested that now that you're the Pope and you're the Prince of more than 1 billion Catholics, that I think, would you be interested in a Day of the Holocaust in the Vatican? It's never been done before. And he promptly agreed. So in April 1994, we had a whole day commemorative event that started at 9 in the morning and ended at 10 at night. And then first I assembled some 200 prominent survivors of the Holocaust, male and female from all over the world. I brought people from Australia, from Brazil, from the United States, and he received all of them, and he spoke to each one. We made photographs with them. We spent with him from 9 till 12:30. After 12, at 1 o'clock, they served the first and only kosher luncheon in the Vatican. An unheard of thing until that time. I don't think they served anyone since then. And then I spoke, and he responded. Then in the evening, there was a memorial concert in the back hall of the Cathedral of the Vatican. There's a concert hall, a beautiful concert hall. And I brought in the Royal Philharmonics from London. And we had in the program certain things from Leonard Bernstein's Chichester Psalms and others. And there was a composition, Kaddish, that Leonard Bernstein made. So we brought in Richard Dreyfuss from Hollywood to be participate in it. And this was all done with the Pope. All I can tell you is that the Pope lit a candle, one of the 6 candles for the 6 million, and my granddaughter lit another candle next to him. And so that it was magnificent that this man has asked for a 3-minute silence, and he spoke about it, and he had tears in his eyes. I think that in him, certainly the Jews have a friend.
It's a wonderful story. I wanted to ask you about a statement you made once, and we just have a few minutes here, but you have said, as we look back at the Holocaust, that within that story is the solution to all of the world's problems. I wonder if you could speak to that.
You mean in the experiences of the Holocaust?
Yes.
Well, you have to realize from a psychological point of view that we are people, human beings, all kinds of human beings, regardless race or religion or whatever. We consist of emotions, subconscious. We consist of our brain, our intelligence, our logic. And this is always in clash, one thing with another. We have as many weaknesses as we have pluses, all of us.
Right.
Some a little more, some a little less. In the depths of the Holocaust that I saw, even though I was a teenager, that I witnessed, you saw all the radical, beautiful things about human beings and all the most ugly things about human beings. You really saw what love means. What means a mother and a daughter, a mother and a child, a father and a child, a husband and a wife. You saw the tragedy and the clashes of survival from all these friend with friend, grandmother to a grandchild. and at its in draconic circumstances, and only then you realize how we human beings should look at the mirror at ourselves, because we believe we are only made of good. We're not. We don't look enough in the mirror in order to be humble enough. That's why those that don't look in the mirror, the less we look in the mirror, the less humble we are. The more we'll be in the mirror is the Holocaust. Of course, the generations subsequent cannot look at the mirror the way I looked at in the Holocaust and saw all our weaknesses and all our strengths. So the Holocaust is a mirror to me. It shows me what compassion is. On the other side of compassion can be revenge. What love is, but that love on the other side of the coin is hate. And so we are human beings are a complicated organism, a complicated species. But I can say to the public, look at the mirror and you'll be a better human being. Look at yourself at the mirror. Realize, don't always say, I will always be good. You don't know. If you won't watch yourself, you're not going to be always proper or good or behavioral or especially tolerant. You know, this country, the United States, is, in my view, one of the most tolerant countries, societies. So we should try to avoid losing that.
Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Eisner.
Thank you.
Congratulations on all your wonderful words
It's a
that you help
pleasure.
all of us. And thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.
Writing Out Loud is underwritten by
Koch Industries. Koch is a proud employer of nearly 1,000 Oklahomans. Koch Industries, you know us better than you think.